Good morning, everyone. My name is Bianca Mitchell. I am from the Pueblo of Acoma, and I am AIANTA's Education Manager. AIANTA provides technical assistance and training to tribal nations and Native-owned enterprises engaged in cultural tourism, hospitality, and recreation. Our mission is to define, introduce, grow, and sustain American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian tourism that honors traditions and values. Our 24th Annual American Indian Tourism Conference is this October 24th through the 27th, 2022 at Harrah's Resort, Southern California, hosted by the Rincon Tribe of Luiseño Indians. Registration is now open and sponsorship opportunities are available. Visit our website at aianta.org to learn more about our educational program offerings. Today's webinar is on resources for Native agriculture production and conservation. This session is a part of 3 series. Session 2 will be on adding value to Native agricultural products and will take place July 12th. And the final session will be developing tribal tourism enterprises based on Native values on August 9th. The series is designed to highlight resources to help Native-owned startups and enterprises further develop and expand agricultural opportunities in tribal communities. These webinars will be 90 minutes and offered a moderated panel discussion coupled with smaller group sessions with federal partners and tribal entities to explore specific topics and resources. Just letting you know that we will have the 2 breakout sessions once the webinar has ended. We will put the Zoom meeting links in the chat for you to click on 2 of the breakout sessions. One will be financial resources, FSA led, and natural resources and conservation will be the other Zoom meeting. So look out for those links toward the end of the webinar. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Ted Bellow, Tribal Relations Team Lead and Tribal Coordinator with the United States Department of Agriculture. Welcome, Ted.
Thanks, Bianca. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Bellow, and I'm the Tribal Relations Team Lead for USDA Rural Development, as well as the Tribal Coordinator for USDA Rural Development. I'm coming to you today from Denver, Colorado area from our home office. So hopefully the dog and the child that's in the lower part of the house behave themselves today, but it's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to first thank the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association for working with us on this webinar series. I've had the good fortune of partnering with them in the past, but on more focused webinars that were really just looking at our business and cooperative programs and value added and agritourism opportunities in tribal communities. In planning the webinar series, we really wanted to take a step back and sort of start literally in the ground with agricultural production and bring resources to individual Native American producers as well as tribal organizations and tribes themselves on how you can get started in ag production, which rural development, we do not have programs that can directly assist you. So today's webinar, we're going to start with that. And then as Bianca mentioned, we'll be dealing with value added topics in the next webinar and then bring it all together with more direct conversation on agritourism opportunities down the line in August. So very grateful for the opportunity to be here today. We've been planning this for a while. It's always an exciting time when all that planning comes to fruition. So thanks again to AIANTA. Thanks again to all of the panelists that have joined us today. We got a jam-packed schedule. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my good friend and colleague, Mr. Josiah Griffin from USDA's Office of Tribal Relations. Josiah?
Well, hello, Ted. And I'd like to echo Ted in saying thank you to AIANTA for helping to share time and coordinate this important discussion. So aloha kako. My name is Josiah Griffin. I am Hawaiian Samoan. And on behalf of the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Office of Tribal Relations, I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar series. We know after and during the COVID-19 pandemic that there were a number of issues that arose throughout Native American and Alaska Native food supply chains. And there's been a growing number of tribes and tribal producers that have stepped into this space, either for the first time or to build out their work in new ways to make sure that the needs of their community and the needs of their market were being met. In talking with all of you across Indian country, the message that we hear loud and clear is that food sovereignty is economic sovereignty. And as you're thinking about tourism, agritourism is such an important piece of this conversation. And I'm glad that we're able to start kind of building out the foundation for what this conversation looks like with the discussion on resources for native agriculture, productions and conservation. There are a few people that are able to talk through this in a more clear, concise, and meaningful way than Administrator Duchen. And with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer Perez-Cole, the Tribal Liaison from the Farm Service Agency, to do introductions.
Good morning. It's great to be with you today. I've been with Farm Service Agency for 12 years and in the National Outreach Office since November. I assist FSA offices nationwide with tribal outreach responsibilities, and I work with tribes, tribal producers, and organizations to improve educational outreach and access to FSA programs and services. I'm a member of the Nakota tribe from the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana, and have the great pleasure of introducing the first Native American administrator in FSA history, Skye Duchen. Administrator Duchen is a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe and will provide an overview of FSA programs and services this morning. Administrator Duchen.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm really happy to be here talking with our friends at AIANTA. Thanks for inviting us to come in and share what we have to offer to Native American producers as they travel down that journey. As Jen and Josiah and anybody that's worked with me know, I typically go off book pretty quick from the written material, but Jen has put together some slides here that I think help give you an idea what we're up to. So in our FSA's portfolio, we basically have farm programs, which are disaster assistance, conservation, safety net, price support. Those are the farm programs, the subsidy-based programs, if you will. But I think as important as that is the farm loan programs. And to me, that's really the example of where the FSA can step up and do better and really put a foundation under our producers to enable them to handle a lot of the things in the farm program side from production income. The title is Production and Conservation of this talk. And I think on the next page, we've got some contact information that we'll just leave up there. But I want to talk just about the continuum of the series that you're putting out there and how it resonates, I think, with what was clearly evident on this continent 500 years ago before the Europeans got here and ignored what they observed. Everybody that has listened to me speak knows I'm a big fan of the book by Jack Weatherford called Indian Givers. And in that book, he talks about the regenerative soil health efforts that were going on. The concept of freedom sprung from this continent. The concept that America now has taken as its own and in some cases stayed true to, in other cases co-opted and kind of bastardized a little bit. So I think the continuum you're on is one that's important, and it starts with production. And in order to be in meaningful ag production, you have to have land access or control of the land in order to do that. Now, there are many different ways that this happens in Indian country. That can be through individually owned trust land. It can be through a lease or a permit on trust land. It can be through restricted fee status land, or it can be actual just fee patent status land. But critical to being able to do production and use our services, you have to be able to demonstrate control of that land. In the past, FSA has struggled to reach Indian producers where they're at. We're really trying to improve our ability to do that under the Vilsack administration with the support of the secretary and the other aspects of the department, taking a look at the way we engage with tribal producers, trying to find the things that work and then adjusting the policy to fit the solution instead of saying, our policy excludes you. We're starting to gain some ground on that. Those efforts have been very well informed by a couple of different tribal consultations that were nationwide in scope, but we had a very focused consultation session with the Montana tribes a few weeks back and got some very valuable insight on what we can do to better serve our tribal communities. So that's production. The next aspect of that production, I think, is the value added component that you're talking about. How do we turn that into food in our territory? Because right now, the biggest export from Indian country is extracted natural resources in the form of livestock, grains, and what have you. And while we've had a lot of important conversations in Indian country about pipelines and those running through our country and how they can damage our environment, I think we need to take a look at what that blacktop highway that serves as a pipeline for our natural resources leaving, and what that means and how it impacts the rest of our territory. Because when you're in that commoditized extractive cycle of ag production, you're trying to sell bulk quantities, hopefully realizing pennies per unit in profit. And from that, you're trying to eke out an existence. Now, the value added aspect of this is so important because just take, for example, the cows that are behind Jennifer on her picture, or the buffalo that are on the picture on the slide before. If we turn those from live animals into a protein product within our jurisdiction, we have done at least a 4-to-1 amplification in value of our natural resource. And we've positioned ourselves to trade with other nations, be they fellow tribal nations or our non-tribal nations that surround us as well. So that food production and using that food as a tool to help improve our overall economy is really part of what we were already doing prior to European arrival. And that's the essence of what our culture is. Now, that the culture of our folks is something that I think we should highlight and share at every opportunity. As another aspect of sharing that culture and sharing our ability to revisit our regenerative agriculture practices, to capture the value of this natural resource as food before it leaves our territory, and making sure that our people are fed well with what we have here to eat before we export it. And then, excuse me, last but not least, doing that in a way that's thoughtful of the future generations is just inherent in the culture of our people. And I think it can allow us to capitalize on the growing regenerative ag movement that you see across the country, where folks are talking about soil health and biodiversity as though it's a new thing. I've said many times in the past, the Europeans maybe should have just paid attention when they got here, because all of these things were happening and we'd be a few centuries ahead of the game now in reversing climate change and mitigating the impacts of that. Sharing, that's the next aspect of this. So sharing that experience, sharing the success, helping demonstrate how these practices can lend to that success. Not only success in feeding your people, improving your environment, but also improving relationships. My culture wasn't a closed culture. When people came to us and were respectful and were willing to consider our viewpoint, we welcomed them. You know, when we had those conflicting philosophies, that's when the war and the strife started to happen. And then when we had the borders that were imposed on us by the United States government and others, you know, that's when the intertribal rivalries started to emerge. We all had our own groups that we affiliated with. We had our territories, we had our skirmish lines. I joke with my friends out in the Rocky Mountain region that we stole a lot of good horses from you all and didn't leave you with any. But we can capitalize on the agritourism aspect of the work that you're talking about by using this as an opportunity to share the successes we've got. I get a great chance to see this as I travel the countryside. I've seen a modular processing facility in Montana that I think we should have on every reservation. I've seen a feedlot in the south central part of the country that I don't think we should have on any reservation. I don't think it's respectful to the environment. I don't think it's helpful to that particular ecosystem. I think it extracts and it just further commoditizes every last bit of our natural resources. And once all of our natural resources are commoditized, the only other thing that can be commoditized is our time. And when we get to that stage, it takes us out of that place of innovation and further development, because then we're just punching a clock for somebody else. So as we share these solutions, share the work that we're doing in regenerative soil health, in value-added ag production, in feeding our own people, I think we really have a lot of opportunity there to remind folks, hey, these tribal nations that were here before maybe had a lot more figured out than we gave them credit for. And we can remind folks, let's take a look at this, because they're probably at the forefront of it because they're closest to it to start with. With that, I understand we're going to have a breakout session in a little while where Jen's going to be there to answer some questions. I'll be there to answer some questions as well if I can get away. But I want you all to have my email and phone number. It's zach.ducheneau@usda.gov. And my phone number is 202-941-4675. And I'll answer all of those myself. So any questions or thoughts or concerns or even complaints you might have, please don't hesitate to send them on up, and we will give them the proper consideration and get back to you with an answer. Thank you all for your time. I look forward to the rest of the event and look forward to seeing the outcomes of the entire series.
Thank you so much, Administrator Ducheneau. I have to say, one of my proudest moments at USDA is when you were named as the administrator. So thank you for serving in your role, and thanks to your service to Indian country for your whole life and that of your family. So much appreciated. Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Skye Duchen, the Executive Director of AIANTA, to talk about her native CDFI and the resources they bring to the table. Skye?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Skye Duchen. I'm Executive Director of AIANTA. As I was saying, I am a enrolled member in the Cheyenne Registered Tribe and currently live in Iqaluit, South Dakota, and it's a great fortune to run AIANTA. Bianca, could you go to the next slide, please? So AIANTA is a Native Community Development Financial Institution, and what that means, basically, if you boil it all down, is we're a nonprofit lender, and we are unique in the fact that we only finance Native agriculture activities. There is a huge gap in the industry, so we are working to fill that and get all of our Native producers the access to patient and appropriate capital. We work together with our producers in more of a cooperative effort. We try to change the dynamic between a lender and a borrower and be more of a partnership approach. And not only do we finance, do the financing and the lending side, we also pair that with a lot of technical assistance to make sure that the borrower is well-rounded and getting set up for success. And we like to focus just as much on the relational side as the transactional side, and that's where our nonprofit side of the lending really sticks out. Can you go to the next slide, Bianca? So specifically, what do we do here at AIANTA? So I'll talk about our financing in the next few slides, but we have a variety of different loans that we can use to get our producers on the path that they need to success. But we also pair those loans with technical assistance like I was talking about. We really meet our producer where they're at. We've got a lot of new and beginning producers that come to us, and sometimes they need more assistance understanding some of the financial literacy skills and what does all these ratios on your balance sheet mean and stuff like that. So we'll work with those producers so that they fully understand that. Then on the other end of the spectrum, we'll get more established producers, and we can also work on things like succession planning and taking your operation to the next step, marketing your products and stuff like that. We really meet the producer with where they're at, which is something that I'm really super proud of us and our team and the systems that we get to provide to our producers as paired with the lending. We can finance anything native agriculture related. So we get a lot of production agriculture. We also do a lot of value added. We do egg transportation. We do all kinds of things. Anything native ag is great, and that includes tourism. We have a lot of inquiries, and we've got some loans in our portfolio where they grow a lot of product and then sell that to tourists in their area and things like that. Next slide. So we've got our youth loan, and we've got up to $5,000, 10 to 20 years old, 12-year repayment, something pretty similar to be paired with FSA youth loans and other kind of financing. Next slide. Then we've also got our general loan, which is the most flexible. Oh, I'm getting some messages.
Kyla, it sounds like you have some background noise.
Oh, shoot.
The participants can't hear your presentation that clear.
I'm not sure if I can get rid of the background noise because I'm on the road. Is there anything else you could do to try to want me to talk louder? Would that be more?
Yeah, try and talk louder.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm on the road, so trying to make this, having to deal with the outside factors is a little bit harder. But anyways, we've got our general loan, which is our most flexible that we can use for just about any kind of production activities. We can use this for livestock, we can use this for equipment, and all sorts of different things. It's up to $250,000. And it can be used for production, value added, refinancing your current debt if your current situation isn't very great, a combination of all the above, stuff like that. And then next slide, please. And then of course, we've got just like your regular operating lines of credit. It says up to 12 years repayment, and it's supposed to say 12 months, but again, that's up to $250,000. That is our loan limit. And then next slide is a new product that we have, and that's for land mortgage and down payment. Access, Zach even talked about it in his presentation a little bit ago. Access to land is super, super important. So we created a land mortgage product to be able to meet that need. So you can use our land mortgage to finance the purchase of the land, or if it's a larger chunk of land and you need the down payment for that, we can finance the down payment for that. You can pair that with FSA loans, with your traditional lenders and things like that. We're really familiar with working in Indian country, and we're really familiar with working with other lenders as well. So next slide. We've got two different repayment styles. We've got our traditional repayment option and then our investment repayment option. And to keep it short, because I know that I'm limited to the 10 minutes, the traditional repayment option is our practices are patient capital, but it's blended payments right off the bat. So you've got your principal and interest payments. But our most innovative and our most unique repayment option is the investment repayment option. And so what we can do with that is we can go up to 5 years interest only payments, and then it switches to principal and interest payments. And that's our most unique and innovative option. And it allows for our producers to reinvest their profits back into themselves and to really grow their operation before they have to start making those larger blended payments. If you've got a lot of room to grow, a lot of new and beginning producers or startup businesses where they've got a lot of room to grow, this is a really, really great option for them, because they get to take all their profits and get more livestock, get more equipment, more infrastructure, cash operate, things like that. So this is a really great option for those kinds of situations. And then if you wanted to go to the next slide, please. I'll actually have you skip through the next two because that's just detailing out the numbers of what the payments might look like. But when you have the up to 5 years interest only, your payments are a lot smaller than the blended payments. And so it's just kind of showing that example of what you can do with that extra money in your pocket. Outside of our lending and technical assistance, we've also got other general programming that we offer. We're offering college scholarships and youth internships, and those just closed for the season, but we want to make sure that we focus on youth programming as well. We've got a market study currently going on, and there's more information on that on the next slide. We've got webinars that are free you can attend around Indian Lands 101, where we've partnered with Indian Land Tenure Foundation. We talk about taxes, marketing your operation. We've got the marketing one coming up at the end of this month, and all sorts of different resources on our website, which is www.akitan.org. And then if you wanted to move to the last slide, Bianca, before I switch, there's all my contact information. And then, sorry, the next slide is where there's the market study. So we've got a market study going on right now. We know that there's a lot of gaps in Indian country around financing, around technical assistance, and all sorts of different things. And so this market study is going to help identify some of those gaps so that we and our partner organizations can work to fix some of those gaps. This is open to the end of summer, and we're offering all kinds of incentives to complete it. So sorry about the background noise, but we will be in the breakout sessions. And if you have any questions, please call my office, send us an email. We are happy to help.
Thank you, Skye. I appreciate you joining from the road, and thank you for your leadership and Akitan's leadership in this space. It's wonderful to have your affordable financing programs, as well as the technical assistance that the CDFI provides, as well as the other resources and programs that you run. I used the QR code. It came right up on my phone. So as I'm introducing the next folks, encourage you to scan that and see what they're doing there. Next up, we have my colleague from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, Mr. Chris Borden, who's their acting tribal liaison for NRCS. So Chris, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Chris Borden. I work for the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service in Wisconsin. As a part of those duties, I serve as the NRCS State Tribal Liaison and the liaison to the Ho-Chunk Nation. My office is in north central Wisconsin, on land that was shared between the Ho-Chunk people and the Ojibwe people. Think of the Natural Resources Conservation Service as the conservation branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We provide technical and engineering assistance to tribal nations and tribal producers, as well as others, to plan and implement conservation practices. We also provide financial assistance to offset the costs of installing those conservation practices. I'd like to talk with you a little bit about how the NRCS can help you attain your land stewardship goals while increasing productivity. Next slide. With 2,300 offices nationwide, there's likely a USDA service center pretty close to your land. You could certainly stop by our offices for a visit to get things started. But while our offices have air conditioned, are air conditioned with comfy chairs and fresh coffee, it's often more meaningful. It's often easier to have a meaningful conversation regarding your conservation goals if we're out at your place to take a look. So give us a call and we can stop out. Next slide. Although conservation solutions that will work on your land are unique to your lands, I'm just going to walk through a couple of examples and examples from Wisconsin, because that's what I know. Next slide. In this example, a tribal nation had 160 acres of cropland, which they wanted to improve by converting the land from annually tilled crops to a perennial prescribed grazing system. This was part of the tribal nation's long-range plan to improve water quality, wildlife habitat, and to improve soil health. This tribal nation's grazing specialist got together with the NRCS grazing specialist and visited this site a number of times and developed the plan that you see here. The plan calls for grain production areas, which are in green, on the map to be planted to a deep-rooted mix of grasses and legumes, which are designed to meet the dietary needs of the cattle, which would be grazing the area. The plan also calls for the areas in red either not to be grazed or to be grazed only moderately, because those areas are really close to watercourses and deserve special protection. The blue lines represent where water lines needed to be installed, and the yellow lines represent where robust fences needed to be installed, and the dotted black lines indicate where less robust electrical interior fences would be installed. In this case, the land was controlled by the tribal nation itself. Therefore, tribal natural resources staff made the application for funding through the NRCS Environmental Quality Incentive Program. The application was approved for funding, and the contract was developed and signed by the tribal council president. Next slide. This is how the area looked before and after the area was converted from annually tilled corn and soybeans to a perennial cover for a prescribed grazing system. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen, those long, narrow fields. Cattle are rotated down those long, narrow fields on a frequent basis. Next slide. And this is done to assure that they always have a healthy mouthful of grass right in front of their noses at all times. This makes for happy cattle, makes for better weight gain, less fossil fuels burned as the cattle go to the feed, not vice versa, and it improves soil health as the grasses and legumes build organic matter and fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. Next slide. Just go through the steps here really quickly. First, the area was planted to that deep-rooted grass and legume mix suited to local soil conditions. Next slide. Next, fencing was installed. It's a fairly complex system of fencing. Next slide. Then water lines were added. Next slide. And the potable water tanks. Next slide. This is what the area looks like now from the air. The NRCS Environmental Quality Incentive Program helped offset the costs of installing these practices, including offsetting the costs associated with the company which installed the fencing. A lot of times people look at conservation practices and say, well, we really don't have the skill set to do something like install this fencing. But the incentive involved with the Environmental Quality Incentive Program takes into account the costs associated with hiring a contractor to do the work. Next slide. Here's another example. A vegetable producer was interested in installing a high tunnel system to extend the growing season for some of their crops. The system would also assist in the control of insects and competing vegetation. In this case, the land was controlled by a producer who was a tribal member. So the NRCS field office staff met with the producer to develop the plan. The tribal producer then made an EQIP application and applied for the funding as an individual and signed the contract. The project was approved for funding. High tunnel was built, and the NRCS reimbursed the producer for portions of the costs associated with the purchase and the installation of the high tunnel. Now, a couple years later, the plants grown in the tunnel are more robust, and with proper management, they need less herbicide, fungicide, and insecticide. And nutrient applications can be managed very precisely, as well as irrigation. Next slide. I'd be remiss if I did not thank the tribal nations and tribal staff and tribal organizations for all of the patience and goodwill and wisdom they've shown us over the years in order to make our programs more meaningful on tribal lands. Much of what we learn from tribal nations, we think of as ecosystem restoration, where our tribal partners actually think of it as on a different level than we do, whether it's blueberry or other soft fruit bed restoration in forests, or maple sugar bush best management practices, or next slide, or wild rice restoration. We always need to remember as an agency that it's more than ecosystem restoration. It's also the importance from a food sovereignty standpoint. It's something that maybe we don't have as good an understanding as we need to, but we are developing a better appreciation for these things over time. Next slide. Just a couple of instances of the goodwill that the important resources that we have and partnerships that we have. I will, when I'm done with my presentation, I will post links to these documents. The first one there on the left illustrates how tribal nations are assisting the NRCS and other USDA agencies interact in Wisconsin. The other is a guide which helps the NRCS understand climate change adaptation planning on a deeper level. And we very much appreciate the patience and goodwill that's shown to us by tribal nations and tribal organizations. It's critical for us to get to a better place. Next slide. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the intersection between land stewardship and marketing. Many customers, many food consumers are interested in knowing more about how their food is produced. And many producers are marketing their products in a way that raise consumer awareness of the importance of things like pollinator habitat, clean water, soil health, and climate change mitigation. These are some examples up on the screen, some examples of regional and national land stewardship marketing, but many individual producers are telling their stories of land stewardship on labeling and at their retail locations. And we love it when we see this, because it raises public awareness of the importance of these issues, as well as distinguishing individual products within the marketplace. That's it. That's what I have. I will post my email in the chat and the links to those documents that I talked about, and my email in case I can answer any questions you have after the breakout sessions. And I look forward to participating in breakout sessions. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. One quick question from the chat. Are the water lines for pasture irrigation, or to supply the portable waterers?
They're portable waters for the pastures that you saw. We're in Wisconsin's fairly high rainfall area, and so irrigation is not necessary for those paddocks. I think there's some things that are worked out in the western states for irrigation as well. But as long as we have that water in the right place, we can make sure that we have that the cows are working and not just sitting around the water cooler.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the answer to the question in your presentation. Just a reminder, as your questions are building up and as you're thinking about sort of things you want to talk about, you'll have a chance to interact with Chris and the NRCS folks, as well as our friends from AIANTA and Intertribal Ag Council and the FSA folks in breakout sessions, which we're going to structure as separate Zoom meetings right after the presentation. So hopefully you can engage with the speakers in a different and more in-depth manner when we get to that point. But next up, we have Kelsey Scott, who is the Director of Programs at the Intertribal Ag Council. So Kelsey, the floor is yours.
Petawashte, everyone. Apologies for also joining from the road, but 'tis the season to be out and about. My name is Kelsey Scott. I'm the Director of Programs for the Intertribal Agriculture Council. We're a national nonprofit organization that was started in 1987 to serve to liaison resources from the United States Department of Agriculture and other service agencies out there into Indian country to make sure that these resources, opportunities, and ability to reclaim some of the management of these resources reaches our Indian communities. Thank you, Sherry, for sharing our website. We have a variety of programs here at the Intertribal Ag Council that I'm just going to do a rundown through each of the individual programs. We have 6 in total. Each of them kind of takes shape to meet the demand or the need of the communities which we serve and the stakeholders that we serve. So we have our Technical Assistance Network. This network is intended to serve as the liaisons, right? The individuals that know how to translate the needs of Indian country to match with the USDA programs that exist that are to help to support and overcome some of the barriers that exist out there on the ground. And so really what our technical assistance specialists are tasked with doing is meeting producers where they're at, understanding how they define their own definition of success, and then helping them to access and utilize the resources that are available to them that will allow them to pursue their own path towards that success. So this support and this technical assistance is very much customized. It's highly individualized and uniquely specific to the individuals that we work with. We work with tribal producers as individuals, as large families, as community stakeholders or cooperatives, tribal entities, and tribal governments across the entire gamut to ensure that we are understanding what it is that our tribal peoples, our stakeholders want to see in the development of their natural resources and their agricultural enterprises and their food systems. And then we help them move closer to that vision for success in reclaiming control of those systems. We have built out additional programs that kind of take on an even more specialized and tailored approach to providing assistance to supplement that of our technical assistance network. Our natural resources programming is very much focused on the buzzword of regenerative agriculture, but embracing the fact that that's simply indigenous agriculture that this land must be so excited to see welcomed back onto her landscape. So we do regenerative ag customized trainings as well as field days out there on the land, where we're uplifting an awareness of present day knowledge and discussion around regenerative agriculture and opportunities in climate smart commodity production, but really appreciating the fact that these are just systems that were already in place on this continent many years ago, and revitalizing some of that conversation around our traditional ecological knowledge and our awareness of our indigenous production practices that really married us to working within nature as a part of nature versus trying to control nature through some exerted dominion. We also do customized regenerative ag planning and coaching with individual producers or with operations that want to make their transition from some of the more conventional or often known as heavy input extractive practices to more regenerative living systems approaches to being able to produce with the land and in harmony with nature. Our youth programming is one of the highlights of the work that we do. We understand that if we're not ensuring a targeted approach to our next generation of leadership, we're not going to have anybody to come up into the ranks of caring for our natural resources and our tribal communities. So we have a tailored suite of resources that focuses in on leadership development opportunities for young professionals, anywhere from high school to college age on into just beginning your career in natural resources or agricultural or food systems. We have a scholarship program that helps with pursuing higher education opportunities for those pursuing either through various degree programs. We also offer producer scholarships on a beginning farmer rancher or new and learning for different production practices. So we really believe in helping producers to achieve and accomplish access to some of those higher educational opportunities that would most often be a barrier, or there would be barriers in place due to financial constraints. So that's another resource that we offer. Our American Indian Foods program is designed to enhance awareness of made and produced by American Indian foods on a global scale. So we elevate an awareness of what indigenous food production looks like, what products are available globally, but we also really target in to understand what domestic trade routes, reestablishing those indigenous trade routes and regionalizing and more localizing our food systems would have as a positive impact on our economies. We have the Regeneration Pledge, which our American Indian foods producers can make as their commitment to ensuring that they are producing in harmony with nature and that they are doing their production in a way that they believe and they know through indigenous ways of knowing that is regenerative and is caring for the land in a way that is going to set the next generation up for future success. Our Regen Economies programming is specific to appreciating that we cannot have a regenerative food and agricultural system without a regenerative economy and a regenerative finance system to support this effort. So this individual is this individual that works on this team and is building out our programming is very specifically skilled in USDA mediation services and providing disaster specific support to producers that are up against a particular issue from an economic standpoint, or perhaps have been found in a various USDA program that is kind of got them in a little bit of a bind, whether it's a past contract that has gone bad, or if it's a default of a loan due to extenuating circumstances. This program is specifically tailored to understanding the situation, finding a productive path forward, and keeping you in production and keeping you on the land, and doing so in a way that embraces, we have to break out of some of that colonial, very degenerative mindset around how some of these lending structures need to be in place. Oftentimes working with our partners over there at Akitan and other native CDFIs that get it a little bit more sometimes. We have our policy and governance programming as well, which is very important as we gear up for the 2023 Farm Bill. We, along with the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, co-collaborate on the leadership of the Native Farm Bill Coalition. This year, we are preparing to launch our Seeds of Native Health 2.0 report, which is titled Gaining Ground. This Gaining Ground report will be a demonstration of all of the ways in which tribal leaders and tribal producers all across the country have informed us of an awareness around what the needs are for the 2023 Farm Bill for Indian country. So make sure that you are at your finger on the pulse of what's going on with the Native Farm Bill Coalition. It is incredibly, incredibly important that every one of our tribal community members is aware and is engaged in that process as we head into the 2023 Farm Bill. Remember, the Farm Bill is kind of inappropriately named. A large majority of Farm Bill funding is specific to food and nutrition funding dollars, which we see in our communities. So it's not just conservation and food and ag or conservation and agricultural production systems. It's also our food and nutrition assistance programs that are involved in that Farm Bill. So we need to get our tribal community members and our tribal leaders aware and talking about this piece of legislation. That's all 6 of our programs. I kind of rattled through them pretty quickly, but in 10 minutes, that's all you get to do. Please visit our website, indianag.org. You can also find us on our social media channels, as well as our e-learning platform. All of those links are available at our website, indianag.org. On our website, you can also join our e-newsletter mailing list, where you will be kept up to date with bi-weekly updates from our various programs. We also have a Native Farm Bill specific mailing list that you can join there as well. And we are getting ready to announce our in-person annual conference, which will take place the first week of December in Las Vegas, Nevada. So make sure that you join up on our mailing list so that you're familiar with when that announcement comes out. I will kick it back to you, Ted.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. We did get a question. Hey, Kelsey, what was the name of the program you mentioned that assisted a tribal producer if their loan had gone bad, faced circumstances that were outside of their control?
You bet. So our regenerative economy specialist is Tommy Peterson. She's centered out of our Cheyenne River office here in South Dakota. And what you can do is you can contact either me. I think my name is on one of the slides that's coming up, my email, or you can contact Tomie, Tomie, at indianag.org. I will also drop her email right there into the chat box.
Thanks so much. And heads up, and you'll get another chance, hopefully, in webinar 2 to talk about value added. And I know you have staff that focuses on that particular activity. So be able to get another 10 minutes or maybe even more if we're lucky in the next webinar. So look for that.
That sounds good.
Thanks so much for joining today. That ends our panel, but we have 2 guest agencies from USDA that also are joining us. They're going to do little shorter commercials for their respective agencies and their colleagues and the resources that they bring to the table. So first up, we're going to hear from my colleague, Pamela Pearman from the Agricultural Research Service. Pamela, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Ted. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. This is an amazing assembly of panelists and a very exciting topic. I'm going to speak for 5 minutes on the American Indian Alaska Native foods and the USDA food composition databases. So I represent the Agricultural Research Service, which is the research arm of USDA, And as was mentioned by our last speaker, Kelsey, we do get funding for food and nutrition work. And so part of what we do is development of food composition databases, trying to represent all of the people in the United States and using those data for applying to consumption information, and then how can we best develop dietary guidance and solve health outcome issues. Next slide, please. So our mission, I'll say this briefly, is to develop scientific tools and solutions to farmers, producers, industry, and most importantly, I think communities that will support the nourishment and well-being of all people. And part of that is to sustain our nation's agroecosystems and natural resources, which is in line with the mission of this webinar. Next slide. So about 2005, and for several years after that, we launched an initiative to develop nutrient profiles for tribal foods. This work was supported largely by NIH, by the Indian Health Service, and also scientists at USDA, myself being the lead scientist. And so we worked with Indian Health Service to identify the first version of our sampling in tribes across the country, as well as a number of tribal villages in Alaska. And so we, at this point in time, though I would not say this initiative is complete, we have sampled primarily in Alaska, but also the White Mountain Apache, Hopi, the Klamath on the West Coast, the Navajo Reservation, several tribes in the Northern Plains, the Shoshone-Bannock Reservation in Idaho. And as I said, we really do need to secure additional funding and plan for the next stage of this important work. These data so far, and there are nearly 200 foods, are presented in the USDA Standard Reference Legacy Database, now housed on Food Data Central. So if you would like to view those nutrient profiles, and we analyzed for up to 65 nutrients, I would suggest that you visit FDC or Food Data Central. And so when we sampled and analyzed these foods, of course, we had to secure tribal approval for sampling the foods. And this was probably the most exciting part of my almost 40-year career. And we analyzed these foods for carbohydrates and fractions, dietary fiber, protein, lipids, vitamins, minerals, and a host of phytochemicals, which we know as secondary metabolites may not be important in curing nutritional deficiencies that threaten life, but they are important to optimal health. So I hope before I retire that we can continue this important work. Next slide, please. Today, as I mentioned, we have up to 65 nutrients for almost 200 foods. You can go on to Food Data Central's SR Legacy and search American Indian. So while we initially set out to have a separate database, they're incorporated into the National Food Composition Database, but you can separate out those foods. And in doing this, we visited the tribes that we had selected for the first run and visited the tribes. We talked to the elders, the tribal council. We secured approvals to sample. Sometimes it was a lengthy process, but we found the spirit of collaboration was so tremendous. It was really a highly successful project. And then part of the initiative called for us to share all of the data that we generated back to the tribes, which we did. And two good examples of this work included several visits to the Shoshone-Bannock Reservation in Idaho, where high school science students collected, fished, harvested foods, and then came out here, stayed with us, and we drove down to Virginia Tech where they processed these foods and did limited chemical analyses on them. And from those data, they developed nutrition education cards for young students on the elementary school on tribal land. And this is our group as pictured. Tremendous group. And I don't think any of them had been off tribal land until that point. So that was exciting. We also shared the data with the Navajo Clinic, Navajo Run Clinic on the Navajo tribal land. And from the data, they developed diabetes education cards. Thank you. So, you know, there are other smaller stories we could tell, but the most important thing is that USDA does receive dollars to do food composition work. And it's important that we remember that it really means we need to get out there and sample and analyze tribal foods, indigenous foods, and even ceremonial foods, and share those with the tribe because everyone benefits from that. Next slide. So in closing, I'll say, you know, we need to continue this research. That means securing new funding and exploring new tribes that we haven't currently captured. But importantly, and in alignment with the topic of this meeting, we need to connect with agricultural representatives because we're not talking about commercially packaged foods. We're talking about tribal grown and harvested foods. And so we need to increase the number that we have in this data set. Updating the literature search for new data on indigenous foods and exploring and planning new studies. So you can reach me at pamela.pearson@usda.gov. I'll be there for a few more years. And please do look at Food Data Central and look up these foods. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Next up, we have Troy Marshall from the National Agricultural Statistical Service, or as we love to call it, NASS. Troy, you're up next.
Thank you, Ted. Again, I'm with USDA National Ag Statistics Service, or short name is NASS. I'm the we're the official data collection side of USDA. I actually work out of Oklahoma and is the Oklahoma State statistician. So we are the official data collection side. So you've heard from a lot of different organizations, and a few of those being USDA organizations that do a great job of helping out producers and different facets of agriculture. Our main job is to collect and disseminate information to help producers make decisions, to help different financial organizations decide where funding needs to go, and to help guide producers on where they're going with their organizations and their farms. So next slide, please. We do about 400 reports annually, but the main one that I want to focus on is going to be our Census of Agriculture, because we are setting up to collect that Census of Agriculture here in 2022. It's one of the most complete pieces of information that we have for agriculture. It's very uniform, it's very comprehensive, and it's done in every county across the nation. So whether we collect information about land usage, we're one of the few industries that can collect information about our producers and demographics about our producers that are actually working within that industry, different income expenditures. We actually even collect information about agritourism, direct marketing, and even information about internet usages and internet availability. Next slide, please. We do collect this information, as I mentioned, across all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and some of the territories that the U.S. has. So with that being said, it's in more than 3,000 U.S. counties and over 30,000 zip codes around the U.S. Next slide, please. But what are we really talking about? You know, we say that we're talking about the Census of Agriculture, but, you know, who are we really after? Well, since the 1970s, our definition of a farm is those that have any place that produces at least $1,000 of agriculture production, where it's produced and sold, or normally would have been sold during the census year. So basically what that means is that if you had a few products that you were trying to produce and would sell, or normally would sell them when they're done growing, and it qualifies over $1,000 of product, you would be included into our population of being sampled for our Census of Agriculture. So we target all those farms across the US. Next slide, please. So why is this important? You know, there's data is everything. We heard Skyla talk about they're doing a little bit of a survey themselves to collect information. Data is needed to make decisions. So by participating in this Census of Agriculture, it shows the nation the value and importance of US agriculture, not only just comparing against other industries, but within the industry itself. We can tell how important food, fiber, and fuel is to the world. It's also helps influence decisions, whether that be for transportation or marketing, different farm programs or farm services, different policies. It also influences some of the production practices or even some new technologies that come in the future. Next slide, please. But it also has a positive impact on your operation and your community. So not only indirectly, but directly itself. The Census of Agriculture provides valuable information for the future for community planning, doing farm succession planning, looking at federal budget support for agriculture for various locations. Next slide, please. Your response does make a difference. It is protected by law. We do get this information from you, and it is protected by Title V and Title VII of US Code. So it only comes to be used for this, and every farm is important, no matter how big or how small. Next slide, please. So be counted. There is strength in on the numbers of having good, solid numbers to make those decisions on. Next slide, please. So here's where you can do that. You can sign up to be counted. If you haven't received a survey from us before, here's where you can go to sign up and collect that information to be counted. But also one of the things that you can do is encourage others. If you've been a part of our surveys, you can see our partner tools. Here's a link to that and see what's coming for the Census of Ag. Next slide will be a timeline. If we'll go to that, talking about when that comes out. But there is data that's collected from previous information on our slides. It will be out there that you can see data all the way back to the 1840s for the census. You'll see other tabulations, and specifically being that this is more driven towards American Indian, Alaskan Native, we do have special tabulations that look specifically at those American Indian and Alaskan Native producers in our census products called our regs. So if you need information about that, please look there. Next slide, please. Here's our mail out dates. We'll be mailing out the end of this year, collecting data early next year, and then data will be available in the spring of 2024. Next slide, please. So just in wrap up, here's our contact information. If you need information, please make sure that you reach out to go to our webpage, or you can call our helpline, or you can reach out to me individually. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of this, and look forward to seeing the series coming forward in the next couple series that we have.
Thanks so much, Troy. It looks like your email address, you maybe forgot an S there. So it's Marshall, right? Not Marshall.
It is correct. Yep, you are correct. It did get left
I might
off.
start teasing you and calling you that from now on, but
that'll work. I did see a couple questions, Ted. I don't know if you want me to grab that right quick, but
yeah, let's just hold that for just one sec. There's two questions that came in, but Bianca, if you could start gearing up the links for the breakout meeting rooms. Looks like she just dropped those in the chat.
Yeah.
And then while folks are thinking about that, there's two questions that came in, one from Josiah and then one from the audience. Were you going to say something, Bianca?
No, Sherry did put the information in the chat, so make sure you copy the link to whatever session you want to be a part of. And
thank you so much. Looks like there's phone lines open as well if you can only join by phone. Let's Josiah, you asked, are surveys anonymous or shared with the IRS? Are you talking about the ag survey?
Yeah.
That's for
So
sure.
they are anonymous. They only come into us. That information is actually disconnected from it. It becomes an actual ID. And no, it does not go to any other federal agencies. Title V and Title VII of US Code actually restricts that data can only be used for statistical purposes. Great question.
Thank you so much. And the other question is a general question, probably best answered by FSA or NRCS. We graze animals before processing through our regenerative grazing project. Do we qualify as farmers or ranchers? Or I guess my question, my add-on would be, does that make a difference?
I'll say if it's driven around NAS side, it does not make a difference.
FSA, NRCS?
For the purposes of our programs, NRCS, it does not make a difference.
I can jump in also and just mention that the Farm Service Agency or USDA programs in general, they associate you with a farmer ID. So whether you're a rancher or not, your identification number that is attached to many of the USDA programs is notified or known as a farmer ID. So don't let the name farmer or rancher spook you in that instance.
So last question before we jump, AIANTA, will the meeting recording be made available to participants?
Yes, the recording will be emailed out as soon as we get the links uploaded to the YouTube page, and then we'll send that link out. You'll also have access to it on our website at the AIANTA webinar series page.
Lorraine set up the wrong meeting.
Well, fantastic. I want to thank everyone who joined the larger session today. Remember, there is going to be a July and an August webinar. July will be focused on value-added producer, excuse me, I was going to plug a RD program. It's not about our program. It's about adding value to agricultural products. And the third will be on agritourism. That'll be the focus. But once again, we'll sort of weave in the themes of the overarching series in each of the webinars. So feel free. We encourage you to join the sessions that you like. Skye, if you could split up your folks, having one person from Occupan in each session would be great. That way people won't have to feel like they're missing out in asking questions directly to the CDFI. I'm going to try to float between a couple rooms. We'll also have RD folks in each of the rooms. So encourage you to go on there, make the most of that discussion time. Many thanks again to our wonderful hosts, the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association today, and enjoy the conversations. Bianca, did you want to say something in closing?
No, just check out our website for more information on the upcoming webinars with USDA. We will be announcing the speakers pretty soon, so just check out the website. I also did want to mention that the International Workshop on Agritourism will take place in Vermont, August 30th through September 1st, and you can find out more information at the agritourismworkshop.com for more information. Other than that, we appreciate you being here today, and have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to copy and paste those links if you want to jump on the breakout sessions. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.